I'm going to hand it over to Alex and Drea and help us talk to us about circularity economy in Hollywood.
Thanks so much, Barbara. We're gonna try and be as interactive as possible. Um, Thanks so much for the invitation. We're really delighted to be here. And it was really nice to have the two of us in concert because I think we can give you kind of the ultimate package. So our keynote is about the circularity economy in Hollywood. And this is NASA data from the year 2021, so last year, showing emissions in North America, and then CO2 emissions and CO2 absorption over the Colombian Amazon. You can see this big hole where it's being absorbed by the forest. So we're going to talk to you about the small circle in Hollywood, but also how it fits into this big circle between North America and South America, the global North and the global South, and then more importantly, this big circle that we all live in. This talk is not meant to be a downer. We're going to do some myth busting. You guys are going to like it. So the first myth is it's not going to be more expensive. It is going to help your business. It is something that you can talk about, and it will bring you clients. And we're going to go through each of these in order. When people talk about climate solutions, they often talk about one or the other: stop emissions or give back or do offsetting or credits. We want to strongly suggest that it needs to be an and. We both need to reduce our emissions and we need to find ways to give back. When you look at the big corporates, pretty much all of them are enrolled in an initiative called Science-Based Targets Initiative. They do very concrete accounting and accountability. And usually the roadmap is a little bit like Xerox is here, where they stop emissions by 2025, or they reduce them as much as possible, and then they look at offsetting. We'd like to suggest it should be a blended solution, and you don't need to do something this formal in order to have the same strategy. When we talk about giving back, I'm calling you from the Colombian Amazon, and our project here started with a single jaguar, Johnny's jaguar in his backyard, and he was monitoring it, and he ended up taking these very concrete climate actions, and we looked at what motivated him, like why did he do he stopped being a hunter and started being a conservationist. And we decided he did it because the jaguar was beautiful, it was wild, and it was much bigger than him. And that's the way that I feel about my solution, Savimbo. And you'll hear from Alex, but that's the way that she feels about ModTech Labs. And then that's the way both of us feel about our planet. This talk isn't about us, it's about you. So we want you to be empowered to make good climate decisions, rational, pragmatic, small steps that you can do that are completely within your power and directly beneficial to you in the now. Climate change, the reason that we even want to do this at all, and I think that's important to address, is it's a huge problem. It's a $23 trillion problem, according to the New York Times. It's our biggest problem, and it's our children's biggest problem, because the world used to look like the left, and now it looks like the right. And we can definitely do something about this today. So let's talk about how and why. I'll let Alex take it away. She's going to talk to you about how you can stop or reduce your emissions.
So this is really the first step in creating an opportunity as a company, the responsible human, to integrate into this world ways that we can blend those things, just like Dre was talking about. It's not just about trying to erase our previous sins, if you will. It's really about helping to sort of thwart those, stop them in the way that is most meaningful for our business and for our lives as humans on this planet. So I'm ready to talk about a few more ways to do that. So we're going to go back to that myth busting for number one. It's not going to be more expensive. So there are actually a lot of ways to actually reduce costs of doing business in production that will be extremely beneficial to your bottom line. They'll be extremely beneficial to the ability to be more creative and actually build more of these wonderful, beautiful things that we love putting out into the world to help entertain people. We bring happiness, we bring sadness, we bring all these magical, wonderful feelings. And for us at ModTech Labs, we look at this from our content perspective. Mod is an automated 3D content generation and optimization solution. And so we're working specifically with some of the areas that are some of the most expensive in regard to costs of doing business in Hollywood. I'm a 3D nerd for media and entertainment and have been focused on leadership and innovation in this area for over 8 years. So my background is actually in a different side of 3D. So I come from interior design and construction technology, so the visualization of places and spaces. And in 2016, we actually launched our first business, myself and my co-founder, which was focused on doing augmented and virtual reality tools for businesses. And with that, we started building a lot of tool sets internally in our studio that we realized were actually the magical part. We created the product as a solution for ourselves. And what these things do, automation increases productivity, increases opportunity for, the ability for creatives to do more creation, as well as, limits the amount of hours you have to use because you're automating a lot of tasks that typically were much more compute, and a few other factors we'll talk about later. So I wanted to talk about why Drea and I actually know each other. If you're not familiar with drone capture, this is just a very short clip of a wonderful flying drone that can be used for many things. Worse, we've seen these used in film to do aerial shots. We've seen them used in many other use cases to do scouting. But Drea has done a ton of stuff to help farmers actually have more accountability and more control over what they're doing in the Amazon. So they're dealing with huge amounts of land. And so how do you actually understand what the tree growth looks like? And what are your responsibilities as a farmer to do reporting? What are your responsibilities as a farmer to make sure that the opportunity is actually doing what it needs to do, right? Well, we can go to the next slide for you. The rainforest being this huge, massive opportunity, you have a really hard time. You can't travel this by vehicle. More than likely, you can travel this by foot. So you have the opportunity to actually minimize your costs by deploying aerial drones. You can actually get very small sized drones that will go up in sort of a corner rather than across a landmass. And you can actually use technologies like photogrammetry to put these pieces together and do topographical mapping. And you can compare and contrast. Okay, well, this quarter versus next quarter, what are we seeing as far as growth? And really the density and the growth of the trees is one of the most important factors for how we're actually creating this balance. So Drea and I work together to actually bring these things into, our side of the world, live camera action. We take these drone images and we actually are helping to process them so that the farmers can have a visual output and see what is happening. And this directly tracks into things that are happening in the film world and this that we work on a little bit more day to day in our world. And it's going to help your business, right? Our experience in bringing these things together and helping create visual acuity, helping create a visual tracking system, helping actually monetize and measure things across the visual spectrum is very important, right? And this helps the business in a multitude of ways. In film in particular, there are a few opportunities. Virtual production is one that I think there's a lot of talk about. People are, I think, overarchingly curious if they haven't gone there yet. There are a lot of ways that this minimizes the amount of actual emissions that you're creating. We can go to the next slide. There are some really interesting ones, right? Well, you think about taking your entire crew on set wherever you're flying, whether it's local or global. There's a massive amount of cost for plane travel, for vehicles to get people. You can send out a very small team of people to actually scout and to even do the photogrammetry and stand capture for an actual location. Then you have to process that data. And so the processing is really important because what's happening in the industry right now is there's a massive switch, right? The VFX typically, sort of the digital side of film, was very much focused on, 60 frames a month. Well, the entire industry is now transitioning to 60 frames a second. So there is more compute in some areas. Compute is reallocated, but it actually processes significantly less than it did before. And then last but not least, combining different opportunities. So what's happening with virtual production? There's also a combination. You're now doing pre-production, production and VFX to some extent, all in one go. Because you're able to create this digital content, display it on the screen, you're definitely seeing the opportunity to condense the timelines, to put out more content, to open up that creative spectrum, which I think is really important as we're all here to be creative. Processing, I'm going to go into a little bit more in depth because I think this is actually another massive opportunity. There are a few different ways that we're queuing into this, but a lot of data centers look like this, whether they're on-prem, you just have a few systems, or you have massive systems that are processing endless amounts of data. There are really key important ways. So edge computing, meaning that you are allowing individual devices to process some of this massive amount of data rather than having to allocate it to a server bank. Then you're looking into recycling. So there are a lot of opportunities to actually take pre-existing chips and rework them into chips that actually can process more effectively and efficiently. And then we're also looking at power. So overarchingly, you can actually reduce the amount of power consumption by a lot of these newer chips. They have massively reduced power consumption. And all of this is also possible with technological advances like machine learning. Go ahead, Drea.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the margin. So there's a lot we can do with technology to reduce our emissions, and that should be our first target. Once we get down to reducing our emissions, we still have to make up a deficit, what we didn't do in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. We're still figuring this out, full caveat. I'm an MD technologist. I do high tech for hard science, and I got involved in climate because of my background in biogeochemistry. So the synthesis of all three fields, looking at Earth as an organism. And I made friends with these two fellows. This is Johnny and Fernando from the Colombian Amazon, who have been activists for 20 years in conserving the rainforest. We made Sabimbo, which creates fair trade carbon credits. I like to call it carbon credits you can talk about. And I want to talk about why we would do that and what it would offer you. Myth busting number 3. It's something that you can talk about. It really just comes down to what you say. So I would strongly advise against net zero claims. It's really tough to prove that with the science, and the market isn't very friendly to it. As you can see, there's been all kinds of exposés about carbon credits and how they're calculated, etc. The reality is this is very hard to avoid because it's a brand new market. It's a legislative market, so it was put into place because of laws, not because it was that well developed. So it's being pushed prematurely in many ways. And the science is still new. We don't know much about our planet. And even if we're doing our best, sometimes you get caught with your pants down because the science was wrong, the fundamental science. The market is driven by laws. So I don't know how many of you guys know about the Paris Accord, but 194 countries ratified a legally binding agreement to lower global temperatures by 2050. Not that easy to do. Right now, there are lawsuits in The Hague between low emission countries like Vanuatu that might be shortly underwater against high emitting companies or high emitting countries like the US who have a lot of claims but no action. And we're probably likely to see a lot more pressure externally from these legal entities forcing us to take action. And we don't necessarily know what to do all the time. The carbon market is split between the compliance versus voluntary market. If you're a large business and you work in California, you're probably regulated. So that would put you in the compliance end of the market. But a lot of companies like Stripe, Microsoft, Gates Foundation, they're going carbon neutral voluntarily because they want to. And a lot of small businesses and consumers are doing the same. So those two markets actually aren't that different from each other. If you look at how we're doing so far, so where we were headed before the Paris Accords was the red line. Where we're headed under current policies and laws is the dark yellow line. People have promised to meet the light yellow line, but where we really need to be is the blue line. So we're still falling short of our climate goals. I think one of the biggest problems in climate is there's a lot more talk than action. You're going to hear a lot about net zero goals. We hear everything about people's ESG reports. There's all kinds of sustainability jargon that makes people feel excluded. And there's lots and lots and lots of high emitting events. But when it comes to action, there's not a lot. And that's where we want to be on the market. And that's where I suggest that you can go. If you just talk about your actions and not so much about your goals and your pledges and your small, real, concrete changes, that's a safe place to be because that's something that you actually did. When you talk about carbon credits, there's a lot of debate about what's a good credit and where is it made. At the end of the day, trees have already been invented. They work really well and they have holistic benefits outside of just carbon. So they also create local cooling cycles with rainforests, and they have a holistic suite of benefits that helps lots of people. So I think it's always safer to go with a nature-based solution, despite it's a lot harder to measure nature-based. So people are now going past just carbon. This is where our project works. We work on the Colombian Amazon, and we work with small farmers. Each one of them has a small farm in one of the densest forests on the planet. And each farm stores about 60,000 tons of carbon. Just to give you a reference, the average North American emits about 15 tons of carbon a year. And so it actually can balance itself out pretty good if you think on a global level. This is our farmers, and this is where they live. If you look at other co-benefits, so one of the ways that you can decide if what you're doing, if you're investing in a good project as a partner, is you look at the co-benefits. What else does the project offer? This isn't as simple as it seems, because co-benefits also tell you a little bit more about the ecology and whether or not somebody's making it up. So if the co-benefits include something like biodiversity, for instance, we have endangered jaguars, an endangered bear, and endangered eagle. That tells you a little bit more about the ecosystem health. Equity. Any project that works with small farmers, works with indigenous groups directly, and is transparent about their margin is likely to be a better project and more robust to criticism than one that doesn't. Water. Water is non-trivial aspect of ecological systems, and we're likely to see more credits emerging that are ecologically friendly, such as water credits, biodiversity credits, a bigger suite. Air. Air is more than just carbon. There's a lot of things that happen with particulates in the air, and trees clean up a lot more than just carbon. We're also looking at fumigation and organic crops. So if projects are talking about the air quality and they monitor animals that relate to the air, like birds or dragonflies, that might be a better project. We talk a lot about soil. One of the best ways to store carbon is something called biochar. So it takes organic matter, it kind of smokes it like a smoked meat instead of burning it, and it stores carbon for 500 years. It's also an amazing fertilizer that's organic. So biochar is a pretty safe place to go for any project. And I want to talk about myth busting number 3. It will bring you business. There's a reason to do climate, and it's not just an either or, like you either make money or you do something good. The beauty of climate is that it is an and. You make money and you do something good. And we probably heard a lot of doomsaying about climate. I don't know if you ever watched the movie Don't Look Up, but I personally thought it was about climate, not an asteroid. And this is kind of like a very dark view of the future. That's not what we're actually seeing in the market. Companies like Microsoft, Stripe, and Bezos Earth Fund are leading the market. And the way that they lead the market is not because they're legislated to do so. It's because they choose to buy from small projects that they've researched well that have ecological co-benefits. And that is creating an entirely new market that's much more robust to criticism. And you can talk about taking those kinds of actions. So 31% of social media users actively engage with climate change content, and more than 1/3 of Gen Z, climate change is the top concern. What's so interesting about this is it's not just Gen Z. I mean, we love Gen Z, they're super optimistic, but they're also young. But if you look, boomer and older, 29%, Gen X, 27%, millennial, 33%. This is all US adults. 31% of people across all these different demographic sectors care about climate. And I think if you make the right claims and you say it in the right way, that it is something you can talk about. It's also something you can do on a very small scale. So for us, a carbon credit costs $5. A biodiversity credit costs $5. A water credit costs $5. You don't have to do a lot to actually make a huge impact where it matters. And we are more than happy to answer questions about anything.
Yay. That's really terrific. I do have a couple of questions. How is this taking off in terms of really, are you seeing people taking this up in your ecosystem right now in terms of people actually actively buying those $5 credits?
Yeah, that's what's so crazy. And it's across the board. We have calls from everywhere, from Bezos Earth Fund, Google, Chanel, the refi community is always in business for climate. But then we also hear from small businesses across the US. We have consumers. It's very interesting who comes through the door. Our policy is we'll sell to entities of any size, but we represent small farmers. And so we're very interested in getting the people who actually live in tropical forests, there's about 1 billion of them, into the market. I think Alex can address more of what her work has been. I mean, we're obviously a client of Alex's because there's direct correlation between what she does and what I do. Alex, do you want to address that as well?
Absolutely. For us, it really is about how do we create that positive impact above and beyond what we're doing with our technological innovation. For us, it was important, we met and created a relationship when I was learning about these opportunities because this was not an area of expertise for me. So Gray has done a lot of work to help create understanding across what is broken about the system and what the opportunities are. And I think, above and beyond anything, there's, a piece of education that has to happen anytime you're trying to enter or, begin something like this that's transformative. We find that even on the tech side, right? People are like, how are you using, machine learning in production? It's kind of a mystery, right? Because it's not really widespread yet. How are you using, carbon credits in production? And the reality is there's a lot of ways to do it. And there's a lot of beneficial opportunities above and beyond sort of what the everyday conversation is.
Right.
Yeah, for a lot of us, we talk to a lot of small businesses. They don't have money to enroll in Science-Based Targets Initiative. They don't have any ESG stuff, but they just want to do something. And our policy is, look, if you want to partner with us, we will be in business 20 years from now. We will get a head start. We're going to do this together. It doesn't have to be this very formal relationship. Anything helps right now, because when you look at growing a big plantation full of trees, it's not a short-term project.
Yeah. And I think that also another myth busting is that offsetting, when done properly, is absolutely part of the mixture that an entity should use to achieve their net zero targets. Yeah. Right. Without offsetting, it's very difficult to get to it 100% on your own. Right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the big corporates are like, we're going to do emissions first, and then we're going to offset. And the problem is that really delays when it comes to solutions. So solutions take a long time to develop. And if everybody waits till 2025, that's a lot. That's like 5 years we're losing. And so I think looking for small projects that you can support on a very small scale now, you could talk about that. It's good for business. It brings you clients, and it doesn't have to be a full, net zero action.
Yeah, I would maybe a call to action is if you're an exhibitor at NAB, IBC, Infocom, you name the event, instead of giving a tchotchke out, you give a QR code with that $5.
Absolutely. Right? I love it.
And you solve a couple of problems, I think. Who needs another plastic tchotchke? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any questions from the audience for Drea and Alex?
I have to say it was an inspirational session to end with today. I thought it was great. So thank you. And some of those videos that you shared were brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say, when you do shots of the Amazon, a drone capture is just 10 times better than on the ground, because you're just gonna get a bunch of trunks, and then you get that drone going up, breaking the canopy cover, and it's a totally different experience.
Yeah. Great.
All right. Well, I think that brings things to a close. Thank you both of you for a fantastic session.